Most of what you see of entrepreneurship is the highlight reel, but let's be honest, there's a lot that happens between I started my business and I have a successful business. And that's why Ponder with Ashley exists. I want you to be able to have resources, to hear other people's stories, to hear my story, to watch people build out loud and be honest about what it looks like to build something from the ground up. There are a whole lot of entrepreneurs out there that have goals and dreams and missions. And if they have the right resources, their businesses will flourish. And so that is what we're here to do. And this week I have Brian Znamirowski sharing his two businesses, HR by BZ and Fractional Healthcare, and his story of how he even got here. How did he end up being a two-time founder? And where is he at in that founding journey? What inspired him? I'm not going to steal his thunder, but that is what you're in for with this week's conversation. So without further ado, let's dive in. The story you've been writing when you move like who you are, that's when everything starts aligning. Welcome to Ponder with Ashley Bryan. We're so excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Ashley. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so we have to start with what problem your business solves because I know a lot of people out there may be currently building businesses or maybe considering one. And it's always interesting to see what problems different entrepreneurs are solving. So let's start there.
Yeah, great question. So I actually own two different businesses. One is focused on HR consulting, and one is focused on providing healthcare to fractional professionals and consultants and gig workers and that kind of stuff. And I really want to focus today on fractional healthcare, pretty aptly named, obviously. I came up with that myself, in case you were curious. I want to focus on that today for the purposes of the podcast because I feel like there are a lot of people who would get into a fractional capacity if they weren't worried about what their health insurance situation would be once they ejected from corporate America. So we can certainly talk about that. We can get into the HR consulting as well, but I really want to focus on fractional healthcare today. And the purpose of founding that business was to, like I said, basically provide a health insurance solution to people who are already in the fractional community or want to be part of the 1099 consultant gig worker community that just simply don't have access to great healthcare outside of like healthcare.gov and whatever local offerings there might be. There's really not that many solutions, and having felt the burn of the transition of healthcare myself two different times from private equity and corporate America to self-employed solo consultant, I wanted to set out and solve that as best I could. I had owned the benefits and all of that, like the health insurance line item on the P&L from a corporate perspective for years. So I thought I was in a position to like make some decisions and create something around what it takes to get a business like that off the ground. It was way more difficult than I initially anticipated. So I mean, I know you know that, but it was quite the journey. It took a long time to realize what a proper solution was. It took a lot of different partnerships and a lot of different conversations to get it off the ground. And really, it almost took 2 years from conception of idea to get it to market to actually like be able to take this thing to other fractional professionals. So quite the journey. Right.
Quite the journey, and I'm excited to dive into a little bit deeper. But I also, you're a unique interview for me because I've been here on the journey with you, and I've been watching this go from idea to reality. And it is such a big problem that a lot of small business owners face, a lot of fractional people face. So I'm excited to continue watching it grow. But let's start with how did you even get here? So what were you doing? You mentioned a little bit that you owned benefits in corporate America and whatnot, but what were you doing before you decided to become an entrepreneur, and how did you get to the point that you wanted to launch fractional healthcare?
Yeah, great question. By career standards, I was an HR professional, right? Started off as a payroll doer, whatever you want to call it, entry level payroll clerk at IBM in 2011, and made my way relatively quickly to a VP of HR spot at a private equity firm that was doing all kinds of M&A and integrations and that kind of stuff. Started that when I was like 35, I want to say. And, great job, very cool, good people, high level work. But that job, the bones of that job were literally the exact same as the job that I had immediately prior to that. More commas, more zeros, more direct reports, like bigger scope of work, but at the like base of it, very similar HR stuff. And that at 35, that made me worry a little bit. Like there aren't really that many more steps that I can go up the like corporate ladder here from an HR perspective. I have 30 years of work left in front of me at least. Like, oh shit, what do I do? Like, what do I do? So, so to the credit of the people that I was working for at that time, I think they recognized that and were like, hey, why don't you do some M&A stuff, do some due diligence on deals and all of that, and got to learn about how that works. Worked very closely with like KPMG, studied financial due diligence at the Lake House in Orlando, for example, as a client guest, which was very cool. But all of that is really like what I would say was the apex of my corporate style career. I had somebody when I was in the director level role, like probably 6 years ago, tell me that I needed to leave that kind of job and start a consulting firm. And I appreciated the advice that she gave me at that point in time. She was actually the broker of the benefits that we were employing at that point in time at that organization. But I was like dead set that I had to get to the VP level job before I could do that. So eventually brought that job home, learned a whole bunch of cool stuff, and that was great. And then was fairly unceremoniously let go from that role in 2023. From there, had severance packages that I was able to parlay into basically launching an HR consulting firm, which was the first venture that I kind of, went down the path with from a business owner perspective. Literally hit the go button on that the Monday after the Friday of my last severance payment. So that was, I mean, I planned it out obviously, but that was an interesting transition. And I mean, that was 2.5-ish years ago at this point in time. So I've been learning the Bootstrap founder journey ever since, as we've discussed many times. But that was really an eye-opening situation for me. So that's kind of how I got from like I'm in a corporate hierarchy job to here today, self-employed, thinking I can do stuff on my own. And along that journey is basically where the idea for fractional healthcare was born. I mean, I in my severance package, I had 6 months of COBRA payments, which is kind of the former employer. I mean, I figured they probably just thought I was going to go get another job like 3 weeks later. And once you like kind of commit to that, you're kind of locked into that until you have some kind of other offering of benefits. So I was kind of at the mercy of my wife's employer to get on their plan when their open enrollment rolled around. And when you're starting a consulting firm and you have no clients and no revenue, when you got to pay a COBRA bill every month, that's a pretty tough bill to swallow.
Insane.
So that was a lesson for young Brian. I will certainly never forget that. And that was one of the major reasons why I decided to found Fractional Healthcare. And then really the second major reason was, like I said, once I became eligible to get on my wife's employer's plan, which is great. They're a huge national company. It was an amount of money per pay for the family that I was not prepared for. Like from an HR leader perspective, like, wow, we're actually making, like, I'm not involved with that organization, but like we're actually making people pay that much money for benefits every week. Oh my God. So that was the final straw for me. And I right then and there thought, okay, I'm going to fix healthcare for fractionals and consultants and that kind of stuff. And as you know, shortly thereafter, pulled together the initial team under NDA for Project Voltron, and onward we went.
Yeah, and that was a really fun and exciting time, and it's been really cool to watch it come to fruition. But I love that the idea for it came on your entrepreneur journey, because sometimes people think like, oh, I have to have the perfect plan, the perfect idea, the perfect everything to get started. And often your best ideas actually come in the trenches of that bootstrap journey and building and trying to figure it out and failing forward and listening to what people are looking for. So with that in mind, I'm kind of curious, what did you think, or what was like a mindset or something before you started your business that you feel is completely wrong now? Like realistically, you thought it was this way, and now you've realized it's the complete opposite, or you were completely wrong about that. What was a belief that wasn't realistic? There's so many, I know.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things that are all wrapped into one kind of main takeaway. And that is, when you are at a place that's doing $1 billion plus in revenue a year, um, there are all kinds of people that want your attention. And what that really means is they want your business. They want my company, our company, whatever, the place that I'm working to pay them to do whatever it is that they do. I and while there are some of these people still standing, I thought that those relationships were more solidified and personal than that. And some of them would help me like get off the ground as HR guy who is starting his business but has never done that before. And that was wrong. That was a pretty tough pill for Brian to swallow because I thought I had all these connections that were going to like immediately like, oh yes, let's do X and Y and Z, and yeah, that's great. They didn't care about that. They cared about Brian, the HR guy at the $1 billion company. So when that goes away, um, some things that you think might be in place might actually not be in place. That was an interesting learning. I would say, kind of in concert with that, I had people tell me before that I should be in sales. I never knew what that meant. But once you find yourself in a situation where you have to sell or you don't get paid, the pressure of that is way different than what it is like to sell something when you're working in a place that's doing 140 million or 1.4 billion in revenue, right? People want to come to you, and that's not necessarily the case when you go out on your own. I mean, yes, I might be a capable HR practitioner, but I'm pretty sure the group Fractional People has like 25,000 people in it at this point in time. So that's like a lot of other probably pretty capable HR professionals that are all trying to like make their own way and make money in this capacity as we kind of move forward here. So um, you have to sell yourself, but you can't be salesy, but you've got to convince people that there's value proposition at the same time, regarding what it is that you do. But you also, like, if you don't hunt you don't eat, so there's some urgency around that. But really, unless you are a fractional salesperson, when you're doing sales, you're not really making money. So there's like this weird balance that you got to find between how much time do I spend doing sales and business development versus how much time do I spend doing HR or tax law or bookkeeping, whatever it is that your like subject matter expertise is in. So that was interesting. And when people said you should be in sales, I was like, well, yeah, I guess I could sell cars. That it's not really as easy as that. So, kudos to the people who are in sales, because actually having lived that, the trial by fire style of like sell or fail, new respect for that. As a interesting, I guess really learning from that. When people reach out on LinkedIn with their sales pitch, I do not shit on them anymore like I used to, because I know what that is like now. So an interesting development there from the life cycle of Brian. And then really marketing yourself, which is obviously pretty close to sales. Like, I thought I was a pretty marketable individual, and even though I might be good at talking and good at holding the microphone and doing the public speaking and all of that, you really have to know what value it is you bring to a business in order to close a deal. And especially from the HR perspective, I'm pretty sure HR has like been the corporate bad guy that is just the punching bag of the entire workforce for like years now. And like, you can't sell like, oh, hey, even though there's value in doing job analysis and creating job descriptions and doing compensation benchmarking and all of that, like, the average business that I've worked with, from what I can tell, is literally just trying to survive. And they really don't care about some of that stuff. Like, is it good to have a succession plan and a way to retain information should key players leave? Yeah, for sure. But that is not on the radar of your average founder. They're literally just trying to figure out, how do I make money? How do I survive? How do I make payroll? How do I keep the lights on? How do I deliver whatever the deliverables for my customers are and all that stuff? So like, you need to be able to demonstrate from a consulting perspective, like pretty instant and clear value as to what it is you do and what the return on investment is for whatever you're going to get paid for the work that you do. Those were, I mean, I think, like I said, they're all related, but those were pretty interesting learnings for Brian along the way, because I thought I had it, and then I pretty quickly realized I didn't have it. And then I had to learn what it was that I didn't have in my toolkit in order to become more effective at getting that out into the world.
It's such a growth incubator. But there's two things you said that I want to touch on. And one is you don't get to take your status with you from corporate. I know we've had a separate conversation about this. And it is like if you've had success in corporate America and then you step out on your own, it is kind of mind-boggling that it's like starting back at entry level in corporate. And no one cares until they have a reason to care. No one cares until you've got the resume, right? And the resume prior to the business that you started doesn't count. Like you can pull pieces from it to help build credibility and be strategic, but people are still asking you, what have you done with your company, not the last company? And then the
Yep.
other thing you said about sales and marketing, just having to learn what's not in your toolkit. I think we have a lack of understanding sometimes of what functions do in businesses because we work in corporate and we're in a function usually. We're not usually working across functions. And so it's so interesting when you start a business and all of a sudden you are HR, you are sales, you are marketing, you're accounting, and you start to realize, oh, this is why corporations have giant teams to do all these functions. It's not because it's this really surface level thing. There's so much depth to each individual department as you build and scale. And most people would really be shocked how many companies are making really good numbers, but are barely breaking even when they're in the millions. So it's a really interesting learning curve. But going into, you touched on this a little bit about like sales pitches and marketing and whatnot. When someone reaches out to you and they're looking for support, what does that typically sound like for you? What's an indicator that this person is probably someone that may need my support or might need to have a conversation with me?
Yeah, and so there's really two different answers to that. I think there's one answer for health insurance and one answer for HR consulting. Um, so from the HR consulting perspective, uh, I think a lot of HR people know that the nature of work that we do is proactive to prevent bad things from happening. Uh, that is very difficult to sell to business owners. Like, hey, if you pay me yada yada, I will make sure that this doesn't happen in the future. To which the immediate question back to that is, well, if it doesn't happen, why did I pay you? Because who knows if it just wouldn't have happened if I didn't pay you. That was a tough pill for me to swallow once I realized that, like, wow, this entire like concept of propping up this function to prevent bad things from happening is really only applicable at big, well-established companies that have already pretty large and functioning HR departments. So that was interesting. What I know from an HR perspective in the consulting world is if someone that owns a business or whatever the situation is, whether it's funded or not funded, bootstrapped, founder led, yada yada, if they have pain, that is when I know that there is the likelihood that a deal can be struck if it's something that I can help with. Uh, and generally, that pain is associated with a thing that they do not know how to fix themselves. So, for me, a lot of the time is spent thinking about recruiting and retention of people to work at a company because those numbers are very easy to determine whether whatever I'm being paid is worth the amount of money that I'm being paid by that company, right? So if you're getting paid $5,000 a week or whatever it is, and your job is to hire people and you hired 0 people that week, it's pretty easy to see that it was not a wise use of company money to pay Brian, the HR guy, to do that. But on the flip side of that coin, if you're paying me $5,000 a week and I hire 20 people for you that are immediately put into revenue generating roles, that is very easily, very easily connected to return on investment from the perspective of, we paid this guy, he found us these people are going to make us this much money because we know each revenue generating employee makes this much money on average, and here's what he got. You do the math, you got an ROI equation, and onward you go. So when a person who needs help from the HR perspective reaches out, if they don't have a very apparent problem that they are specifically reaching out for, you kind of got to dig a little bit and see if there is anything that you can help with. Otherwise, you might be barking up the wrong tree from a deal closure and sales perspective. That's the one thing that I've realized in that bucket since I started doing this. From the insurance angle, there is a large, very large, like in the millions, I'm pretty sure, and growing population of people in the fractional community. There's some debate over what the number is. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says by the end of 2027, something like 89 million people are going to be trying to make money on the side or on their own in some capacity. But when I say fractional person, I mean owns business, has EIN of some sort, like has a very specific like work function that they do. It is not a side gig. It is the thing that they like do to make money, and they are dedicated to making that happen. It is not just like oh, hey, I'm in between jobs, so I guess I'm a fractional person now. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a person that's like out there, like me and you, trying to make it from a self-employed, I deploy my subject matter expertise to companies, and that's what my value is perspective. The insurance options for that group of people suck. And like I explained, I wanted to fix that for the entire community on a national scale because of how painful that was for me to go through, right? And I mean, that journey, as you well know, was like just one immovable object after the next immovable object. For the fractional community, the reason why I had this idea is because I experienced that pain myself. And realistically, the number of options of legitimate healthcare for consultants and 1099 workers and freelancers and all that stuff is not great. And I know there are a ton of people out there that need this because this is a growing community. You can see the numbers in the groups on LinkedIn going up literally by the week. And I think that's for a number of reasons, which we can kind of talk about if you want after the fact. But I know that people need this. I have conversations every week with people who are paying $25,000 and $30,000 a year for their health insurance because they make more money than they otherwise would qualify for subsidies and that kind of stuff through like the Affordable Care Act. And that is bogus, in my opinion. It should not cost you, regardless of how much money you're making, it should not cost you 30 or 40 grand a year to have health insurance that's like okay-ish for your family if you're trying to make money on your own as a self-employed person. It's just completely bananas to me.
100%. And that threshold is like 60K, isn't it?
Yeah, it is not a big number. I mean, which is hard for me to understand. I mean, I know that the framework of basically the entire private healthcare insurance industry is rooted in like the 40s and the 50s. And the reason why it is the way it is because large companies like de facto became the delivery system for healthcare in the United States. But like times are changing.
Yep.
And more people, like layoffs are happening in the tens of thousands, it seems like every week. And, you know, people are realizing that the like social contract of work is pretty dead. And all that needs to happen is one bad earnings report and your job is gone. Doesn't matter if you've been there for 20 years. Or, you know, in some cases, the company is doing great and they hit record profits, but, you know, shareholder return. So we got to cut more people because shareholder return, which I understand the, you know, fiduciary responsibility there, but in my opinion, bogus. And if you combine that with the fact that I think, as boomers retire and Gen Z continues to enter the workforce and they become more disenfranchised with corporate America, as it is, more people are going to try to make it on their own. And this platform that I've created is designed to deliver healthcare, which is one of the main points of concern that people have, to get into this area.
And save you a lot of money. And I know that you've experienced that firsthand with this exact insurance. So it's not a blowing smoke situation. It's an actual, there's savings here for, self-employed people, fractional people, people that are trying to actually start businesses, be successful, and stand on their own 2 feet. And I know we've talked about the future, in my opinion, belongs to the entrepreneur. I think we're going to see the revival of apprenticeship and entrepreneurship in a big way as we have this shift, but that's a conversation for another time. I want to go into, as we get to the end here, what advice would you give yourself now that you know what you know at this point, 2.5 years in? If you were talking to Brian, who's just getting started as an entrepreneur, what would you want him to know today?
Um, that's a good question. You have to be prepared to rely on yourself 100% of the time to get 100% of the stuff done. Even if people tell you they will help you, that might not always happen. And if that doesn't happen and you were relying on something to happen and then it didn't happen, and it's kind of just like a different working relationship than you may have had in corporate America, because like while everybody in a job might be responsible to the company, everybody in this land is responsible to themselves. And even if you have good favor with somebody, if they tell you they're going to do something that you need to have happen and then that doesn't happen, that can really kind of mess stuff up. That was an interesting learning. So I think self-reliance and not being afraid to get into the trenches immediately and experience failure quickly and learn is a huge thing. Um, I don't know. I don't know. So I had the idea for fractional healthcare in like October of 2024, and that thing actually hit the market in March of 2026 after all of the stuff that had to happen happened. Um, so the market kind of dictated that was where I was supposed to go to some degree. And I don't know if that amount of time had to elapse before I actually got to market with it. So I think about that pretty regularly. I did have to study for and pass the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Health Brokers Insurance test to be a licensed insurance broker, and that did take quite a period of time. But even in doing that like every day, that only took a month to accomplish. And like, I think there is a lot of time that is spent like conceptualizing and creating ideas. And I'm an idea man. I love coming up with ideas and all of that. But like, there's nobody to help me execute these ideas anymore. Like in my last job, I had a team of like 36 people that reported to me. The chief of staff is on the ground right here. Like there's nobody that is going to help you execute on these things unless you pay them. And that's completely legit. People are in business for themselves too. But at the same time, like if you don't have money to pay somebody, you have to figure out how to do it yourself. And I say all of that because if I knew then what I know now, the health insurance play may have been the first play instead of the HR consulting firm, because I think that's got the highest upside to have the biggest impact for the most amount of people, which is great. But at the same time, if I didn't learn all the things that I learned on the founder journey for the HR consulting firm, I don't know that I would have been in a position to make the appropriate decisions on the healthcare build. So I think everything happens for a reason, but I guess my main point would be spend less time conceptualizing and more time executing. You'll fail a lot. I've had people say pretty nasty things to me in the Linky Land DMs, but that's okay. That's just part of it, right? And the more comfortable you get with that, the better your product will ultimately be in the long run, right? Like they always tell you that like failure is a better teacher than success. And that's absolutely correct in the corporate sense of things, which is why I was able to get from the point where I was to the point where I ended up so quickly, which parentheses means a lot of failure by BZ. But it's just it hits home so much harder when you are on your own that I think people want to take things to market that are perfect, take things to market that are needed, whether it's perfect or not, which is why I hit the go button on the fractional healthcare piece before I even had a website. Like, this is ready, let's hit it. Website is being built right now. But that didn't prevent me from getting that thing to market because I knew it was needed. And now at this point in time, there's more than just me on it. So obviously that is a well-founded idea. And that's what I would, recommend and coach anybody who's thinking about this. Like, just get in there and start doing stuff. What's
So
the
you
worst
kind
thing
of
you got?
stole my next question because that was going to be my next question, which was if somebody is considering starting a business. And I do want to highlight there's so many lessons that like I don't know if you've experienced this, but for me, I've heard this from other business owners and consultants when I started my business. I've heard similar things, right? Like if I knew this, then if I knew this, that like but the journey is where you learn a lot of the things. And like you said with fractional healthcare, you wouldn't have gone right to market with it. You would have tried to make it perfect. And yet you learned that that isn't actually the best way to do it. You have to just ship it and then work with it and hear from the feedback of the market and all these things. Those lessons I think are really hard to hear when you've never been in the founder seat. But if there's someone that is considering starting a business, or maybe they just got started, they're in their first 6 months, what do you want them to leave this conversation with?
Do more sales, honestly. Like, it doesn't matter if it's referrals or cold outreach or whatever it is. Like, I think there is a huge opportunity on LinkedIn specifically, and really Twitter and Instagram to make sales happen. But like, um, if you don't sell yourself, you're never going to be able to do whatever the thing is that you're good at. And I think there is a lot of fear of failure and the rejection angle of things, which is absolutely true. I mean, I thought I had leather skin from working in HR for 15 years or 17 years, whatever it is, which I did to some degree. But like, at first, doing cold outreach and the rejection of that gave me the X. And honestly, I didn't really like doing it. And I don't know when the switch like flipped there, but now that just runs off my back like nothing even happened because it's been so frequent that you just come to terms with it at some point in time. It's like, okay, this is just a constant. And I think people that are going down this path are not prepared for that in any capacity. And really, you don't know what that tastes like until it is right in your face. But once you become comfortable with that, and then you no longer care about that rejection and that failure, all this new kinds of stuff starts to happen as you continue to expand your outreach. And then you actually start to bring business home. And that leads to, case study, which then leads to referrals, which then leads to not really having to do as much cold outreach. And it all comes full circle. But really getting over that first hurdle of the X related to sales, I think is a huge thing that people need to be prepared to do as they're making their way into this journey.
So powerful. Well, thank you, Brian. This has been like such an awesome conversation. I can literally keep going and going and going, but I do want to cut it here so that people aren't going to literally be stuck on YouTube listening to this for hours and hours and hours. But I'm sure we'll have more conversations in the future. And I just appreciate you taking the time to sit down and ponder with me and share your story with me and what it is that you're building. And I'm excited to continue to watch you grow and watch fractional healthcare really soar.
Well, I appreciate the time today, Ashley. It was great. I look forward to watching you continue to do your thing and get more people on here. And if there's anything I can do to help you out, let me know.
Awesome. Well, there you have it. These are the type of conversations you can expect on Ponder with Ashley. And these are the conversations that normally I have behind the scenes. I am bringing them forward to you so that you can hear what it sounds like to actually build and build out loud and be honest about what it looks like to build a company from the ground up. If you want to connect with Brian, I encourage you to do so, especially if you need health insurance. If you are self employed, if you have 8 employees or less, connect with Brian. There is savings to be had. He cares so much about helping solve the healthcare issue for those of us that have taken the leap. Don't let healthcare be the reason that you cannot stay in business. Outside of that, if you have HR questions, he can also answer those. If you're struggling with sales and marketing, that's my forte. My contact information is always in the description. And we're here every single week with more resources, more conversations, more things designed, more videos designed to help you move your business forward. If you got value out of this, let us know in the comments. And if you haven't hit like, do that so other entrepreneurs can find us. And of course, subscribe, because that's the only way you're going to know when we drop something new. And you're not going to want to miss these conversations, and you're not going to want to miss the things that get you pondering how to move your business forward. With that, I'll see you next week.